On the day Eric decided to give up everything he owned, his father called him a fool. 3 months later, sitting in a wheelchair on a dusty village street corner, Eric realized his father might have been right, but for all the wrong reasons. In the heart of a bustling metropolis, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets, lived Eric, a man who seemed to have everything money could buy. His mansion sprawled across acres of manicured lawns, his garage housed a collection of exotic vehicles, and his bank account boasted numbers that most people could only dream of. Yet behind the facade of wealth and success, Eric's heart ached with a profound loneliness that no amount of money could cure. Every relationship he pursued ended the same way: women were drawn to his wealth, not to the man beneath the expensive suits and prestigious name. They swooned over his cars, marveled at his properties, and dreamed of the lifestyle he could provide, but none seemed interested in knowing the real Eric, the man who longed for genuine connection and understanding. One evening, as he stood at his penthouse window watching the city lights twinkle below, an idea took root in his mind. What if he could strip away all the trappings of wealth? What if he could find someone who would love him for who he was, not what he owned? The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that there was only one way to find true love. He would have to leave everything behind and start fresh, disguised as someone with nothing. When Eric shared his plan with his parents, their reaction was swift and fierce. His mother, a shrewd businesswoman who had built her empire from scratch, warned him of the dangers that lurked in the unknown. His father, a prominent politician with gubernatorial ambitions, was outraged at the mere suggestion. You could be recognized, his mother pleaded. You could be kidnapped, or worse, his father thundered, concern and anger mixing in his voice. But Eric's mind was made up. The emptiness in his heart had grown too large to ignore, and the thought of spending another day surrounded by people who only saw his wealth became unbearable. Under the cover of darkness, he packed a small bag with worn clothes and basic necessities. As he drove away from his mansion, watching it shrink in his rearview mirror, he felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. His destination was a small village, far from the city's bright lights and prying eyes. There he would become someone else entirely, a man with nothing but hope in his heart. As he crossed the city limits, Eric knew there would be no turning back. His journey to find authentic love had begun, even as his parents' warnings echoed in his mind. In the quiet village where time seemed to move at its own gentle pace, Eric began his new life, far removed from the luxuries he once knew. With careful attention to detail, he transformed himself into a figure of sympathy, a crippled beggar in a weathered wheelchair. His designer clothes were replaced with tattered garments, his clean-shaven face now hidden behind days of stubble, and his confident stride gave way to a convincing portrayal of physical struggle. Each morning, as the sun painted the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, Eric would position himself on a quiet street corner. The smooth concrete beneath his wheelchair felt worlds away from the marble floors of his mansion. Here he experienced a kind of invisibility he had never known before. People hurried past, their eyes carefully avoiding his, as if his presence made them uncomfortable. Some would cross to the other side of the street, while others clutched their belongings tighter as they passed. The rejection stung, but it taught Eric a harsh lesson about how the world treated those who had nothing. Then came the day that changed everything. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the village streets, a young woman named Destiny approached his corner. Unlike the others who had passed him by, she stopped. Her eyes, warm and kind, met his without hesitation. Despite her own worn clothes and the obvious signs of a life lived in poverty, she reached into her small purse and offered him what little she had. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice carrying a genuine concern that touched something deep within Eric's heart. The simple act of being seen, of being acknowledged as a human being rather than an obstacle to avoid, nearly brought tears to his eyes. Their conversation, though brief, revealed a compassion he had rarely encountered in his privileged life. Later that day, Destiny returned with her father, Roland, a farmer with calloused hands and a gentle spirit. Roland listened as his daughter explained finding Eric on the street. Without hesitation, Roland offered what they had: a roof over his head and a place at their table. Their small home, though humble compared to Eric's mansion, radiated a warmth that no amount of wealth could create. As Eric was wheeled into their modest dwelling, he felt both gratitude and guilt. These people who had so little themselves opened their hearts and home to a stranger in need. In that moment, surrounded by genuine kindness, Eric began to understand that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars and cents, but in the capacity of the human heart to care for others. In the weeks that followed, a gentle rhythm took hold in Roland's modest home. Eric found himself embracing the simple pleasures of village life, spending his days in the small garden Roland had created for him. But it was his time with Destiny that brought the most profound changes to his heart. She would sit with him in the evenings, sharing stories of her day at the market, her dreams, and her infectious laughter that seemed to brighten even the darkest corners of their humble dwelling. Unlike the women from his past who had pursued his wealth, Destiny saw beyond his supposed disabilities. She noticed how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he listened intently to her father's farming stories, and how he showed genuine interest in their simple way of life. For the first time, Eric experienced what it meant to be truly accepted for who he was, not what he possessed. Roland, too, treated him like a son, teaching him about farming and sharing wisdom earned through years of honest labor. But their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed in the small village. Judah, a wealthy young man known for his flashy cars and expensive clothes, had set his sights on Destiny long before Eric's arrival. He would appear at the market where Destiny sold vegetables, making grand gestures and promises of a luxurious life in the city. Each time Destiny would politely decline, unmoved by his material offerings. Frustrated by Destiny's rejections, Judah enlisted the help of Sophia, Destiny's childhood friend. Sophia, dazzled by Judah's wealth and harboring her own desires for a life of luxury, agreed to help convince Destiny to accept his proposal. She began visiting Destiny frequently, painting vivid pictures of the comfortable life that awaited her with Judah, while subtly belittling her growing attachment to the poor, crippled beggar. As tensions rose, the contrast between true and superficial love became increasingly clear. While Judah pursued Destiny with expensive gifts and grand promises, she found herself drawn more deeply to Eric's genuine kindness and understanding. Their evening conversations grew longer, their shared laughter more frequent, and their hearts more intertwined. Yet beneath this blossoming love, Eric's guilt grew heavier. Every act of kindness from Destiny and Roland added another layer to his burden of deception. He had found the authentic love he sought, but it was built on a foundation of lies that threatened to crumble at any moment. The turning point came on an ordinary evening, when Roland gathered everyone in their small living room, his weathered face beaming with pride and purpose. After months of watching Eric struggle in his wheelchair, Roland announced he had sold his ancestral land, the family's most precious possession, to pay for Eric's surgery. The weight of Roland's sacrifice crushed Eric's heart. This man had given up his heritage, his only valuable possession, all for a lie. In that moment, looking at Roland's hopeful face and Destiny's joyful tears, Eric felt the full burden of his deception become unbearable. His voice trembling, he began to confess. The words spilled out like a flood about his true identity as a billionaire, his mansion in the city, his wealthy family, and his scheme to find genuine love by pretending to be poor and disabled. As he spoke, the warmth in the room turned to ice, and the loving faces before him transformed with shock and disbelief. Roland stood frozen, his face draining of color as the truth sank in. The land he had just sold, the legacy of generations, had been sacrificed for nothing. His legs gave way, and he collapsed into his chair, his eyes fixed on some distant point as if trying to make sense of this betrayal. The proud farmer who had opened his home to a stranger now looked utterly broken. Destiny's reaction cut even deeper. Tears welled in her eyes, but these were different from the joyful ones of moments before. Her voice, usually so gentle, turned hard with anger and hurt. All this time she whispered, her words sharp with pain, everything was a lie. The love that had grown between them, so pure and real, now seemed tainted by deception. The cozy home that had been filled with laughter and warmth now felt suffocating with silence. Eric tried to explain his reasons, to make them understand that while his circumstances were a lie, his feelings were real. But his words fell on deaf ears. The trust he had built, the love he had found, lay shattered at his feet like broken glass. Unable to bear the weight of their silent accusations, Eric gathered his few belongings and walked out of the house, no longer pretending to need the wheelchair. As he stepped into the cool night air, he heard Destiny's quiet sobs through the open window. Each step away from their home felt like a knife in his heart, knowing that in his quest to find true love, he had destroyed the very thing he sought most. Back in the glittering city, Eric found no refuge from the storm he had left behind in the village. His father, consumed by his gubernatorial campaign, had orchestrated what he believed would be the perfect political alliance: Eric's marriage to Chief Timothy's daughter. The news hit Eric like a physical blow as his father laid out the plan with cold precision, treating his son's future like another campaign strategy. "This marriage will secure my position as governor," his father declared, his voice leaving no room for debate. "Chief Timothy's support is crucial, and you will do your duty to this family." The words echoed through the massive study, each syllable a reminder of the golden cage Eric had tried to escape. But his heart, still aching from leaving Destiny, could not bear the thought of another loveless arrangement. Despite his father's threats and manipulations, Eric made his choice. Under the cover of night, he slipped away once again, racing back to the village, to Destiny, to the only real love he had ever known. His father's fury at this defiance knew no bounds. The election slipped through his fingers as Chief Timothy, insulted by Eric's rejection of his daughter, withdrew his crucial support. Blinded by rage and wounded pride, Eric's father made a decision that would change everything. He sent his men to Roland's house, their instructions clear: teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. The attack was swift and brutal. Roland, caught completely off guard, was beaten severely, his body broken by fists that carried a powerful man's wounded pride. When Eric learned of the attack, something inside him snapped. The weight of all his father's manipulations, the violence against an innocent man who had shown him nothing but kindness, pushed him past his breaking point. With trembling hands, he retrieved a gun from his drawer and stormed into his father's study. The mighty politician, nursing his election defeat with a glass of whiskey, looked up to find his son pointing a gun at him. "If Roland dies," Eric's voice was cold, steady, "then you will die too." For the first time, fear crept into his father's eyes as he realized the monster he had created through his own ruthless ambitions. In that tense moment, as father and son faced each other across the barrel of a gun, years of manipulation, control, and broken trust hung in the balance. The grand study, with its expensive furnishings and imposing decor, became a battlefield where love finally stood up to power. In the quiet hospital room, Roland lay healing from his injuries, his face still bearing the marks of violence. The door creaked open and Eric's father entered, his usual commanding presence diminished by the weight of guilt on his shoulders. The sight of Roland, a man who had shown his son more genuine love than he ever had, humbled him completely. With trembling voice, he approached Roland's bedside and did something he hadn't done in decades. He apologized. "I let power blind me," he confessed, his words heavy with remorse. "I forgot what truly matters in life." Roland, despite his pain, listened with the same quiet wisdom that had first welcomed Eric into his home. Through labored breaths, he shared words that would forever change Eric's father. "Life is too short for hatred. Our children's happiness should be our greatest ambition." This moment marked the beginning of a profound transformation. Eric's father, the once ruthless politician, began redirecting his considerable resources toward making amends. He ensured Roland received the best medical care available and took steps to restore the ancestral land that had been sold. More importantly, he finally gave Eric his blessing to marry Destiny, recognizing that true love was worth more than any political alliance. Meanwhile, life had different lessons in store for Sophia. Her schemes with Judah had backfired spectacularly, leaving her alone and struggling. One day, as Destiny drove to her prenatal appointment, she spotted a familiar figure by the roadside. Sophia, now destitute and pregnant herself, eating a simple loaf of bread. The same woman who had once mocked Destiny's humble life now found herself in circumstances she never imagined. Instead of turning away, Destiny showed the same compassion that had first drawn Eric to her. She wrote Sophia a check, offering her former friend a chance at a fresh start. "Use this to build a new life," she said softly, demonstrating that true grace comes from helping even those who once sought to harm us. As Roland recovered, his wisdom continued to touch everyone around him. During family gatherings in their new home, a comfortable but modest house that Eric had bought in the village, Roland, would often remind them wealth isn't about what's in your pocket, but what's in your heart. These words rang especially true as they watched Eric and Destiny's love grow stronger, built on a foundation of honesty and acceptance that no amount of money could buy. In the warmth of a spring morning, Eric and Destiny stood before their friends and family, exchanging vows in a simple ceremony that celebrated not their wealth, but the depth of their love. The village square had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, but the most beautiful sight was the genuine joy that radiated from the couple. Roland, fully recovered and beaming with pride, walked his daughter down the aisle, while Eric's father watched with tears in his eyes, finally understanding that his son's happiness was worth more than any political victory. 3 months after their wedding, Destiny shared news that brought even more light into their lives. She was expecting their first child. Eric's reaction was pure elation. He would finally have the family he had always dreamed of, built on a foundation of genuine love rather than social expectations. His mother, who had once opposed their relationship, now doted on Destiny, calling regularly to check on her daughter-in-law and future grandchild. Life had a way of bringing everything full circle. One day, while driving to her prenatal appointment, Destiny's car broke down near a small mechanic's shop. As she waited for help, she spotted a familiar face, Sophia, now living in poverty after her own dreams of wealth had crumbled. Instead of harboring resentment, Destiny extended a helping hand to her former friend, offering her the means to start anew. This moment perfectly captured the lesson they had all learned: true wealth lay not in bank accounts, but in the capacity for compassion and forgiveness. Their story became a powerful reminder of essential truths about love and life. The deception that Eric had initially used to find love had taught them all about the importance of authenticity. His father's journey from ruthless ambition to humble acceptance demonstrated how pride and greed could blind one to life's real treasures. Roland's unwavering wisdom and forgiveness showed that true strength often lay in the ability to open one's heart, even after being hurt. As they settled into their life together, Eric and Destiny chose to live modestly in the village, using their wealth to help others rather than to showcase their status. Their home became a testament to the fact that happiness doesn't come from material possessions, but from the bonds we forge and the love we share. In the end, Eric had found what he sought, not by pretending to be someone else, but by becoming his truest self, a man capable of both giving and receiving genuine love. The intertwining fates of those surrounding Eric and Destiny's love story revealed how choices, driven by pride and deception, could lead to unexpected consequences. Sophia, who had once wielded her beauty and social connections like weapons, orchestrated elaborate schemes to help Judah win Destiny's affections. Her manipulation knew no bounds as she played both sides, accepting Judah's money while pretending to be Destiny's concerned friend. However, pride preceded her fall. When Judah ultimately rejected her advances, choosing to pursue Destiny despite Sophia's offers of wealth and status, her carefully constructed world began to crumble. Judah's story paralleled Sophia's in its cautionary nature. Behind his facade of wealth and sophistication lay a web of lies. The expensive cars he drove belonged to his employer, the designer clothes were purchased with borrowed money, and his promises of a luxurious life were built on nothing but air. When his deception was finally exposed, his revenge took a dark turn. He orchestrated Sophia's downfall by paying a poor mechanic to deceive her, leading to her pregnancy and abandonment. The very pretense he had lived by became the tool of his vindictive retribution. Meanwhile, Eric's parents underwent their own transformative journey. His mother, initially resistant to the idea of a village girl joining their family, watched as Destiny's genuine love and kindness brought out the best in her son. Gradually, her protective skepticism melted into warm acceptance. She began calling Destiny regularly, sharing family recipes, and eventually becoming the supportive mother-in-law she had never expected to be. The most dramatic transformation, however, belonged to Eric's father. The man who had once viewed everything through the lens of political advantage found himself humbled by the consequences of his actions. The sight of Roland in the hospital, beaten because of his orders, shattered his worldview. His son's threatened violence forced him to confront the monster he had become in pursuit of power. Through this crisis, he discovered that his truest legacy lay not in political victories but in his relationship with his son. The reconciliation of the family came slowly but surely. Sunday dinners became a time when city sophistication and village wisdom met in harmony. Eric's father, once so concerned with appearances, learned to appreciate Roland's simple but profound insights about life and love. What began as a story of deception and pride evolved into one of redemption and understanding, proving that even the hardest hearts could soften when touched by genuine love. As the final chapter of this tale unfolds, its deepest lessons echo through the lives of all who witnessed it. At its heart, the story reveals a profound truth: genuine love and connection cannot be bought with wealth or status. Eric's journey from a lonely billionaire to a man truly loved for himself illuminates how authentic relationships surpass any material riches. His initial deception, though born from a desire to find real love, teaches us that honesty forms the bedrock of lasting relationships. The pain his lies caused, despite his pure intentions, demonstrates how even well-meant deception can shatter trust. The power of forgiveness shines brilliantly through Roland's response to betrayal. Despite losing his ancestral land and suffering physical violence, his capacity to forgive transformed hatred into healing. His wisdom reminds us that holding onto anger only imprisons ourselves, while forgiveness sets us free. Similarly, Destiny's compassion toward the fallen Sophia illustrates how forgiveness can break cycles of bitterness and create opportunities for redemption. The story exposes the hollow nature of materialism through Judah's false displays of wealth and Sophia's desperate pursuit of status. Their downfall serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of building one's life on superficial values. In contrast, the simple yet profound happiness found in Roland's humble home demonstrates how true contentment comes from authentic connections rather than material possessions. Beyond these primary messages, the narrative weaves together deeper themes about human nature and society. The stark contrast between village life and city expectations reveals how artificial class divisions can blind us to genuine human worth. Eric's struggle between family loyalty and personal happiness reflects the universal challenge of balancing duty with authentic self-expression. Perhaps most powerfully, the story demonstrates love's ability to transform even the hardest hearts. Eric's father's journey from ruthless ambition to humble understanding shows how genuine love can reshape our values and priorities. The healing of family rifts and the bridging of social divides through understanding and acceptance reveal love's power to overcome seemingly insurmountable barriers. In the end, this tale reminds us that life's greatest wealth lies not in what we possess, but in the authenticity of our connections and the depth of our capacity to love and forgive. Through its complex web of relationships and choices, it teaches us that true happiness comes not from external success, but from the courage to be genuine and the wisdom to value what truly matters.